Thank you again for being here. It's been a great series of conversations so far. And I think, I don't even know if we intended it this way, but the kind of arc of the conversations has actually, there's been a lot of connection points between them, even though they've been on a variety of different issues. The topic of tonight's conversation, I think, is something that's kind of underlying all of the different societal problems that the public policy solutions that we've been discussing are the underlying problem that a lot of those are responsible for. So I'm really excited for this, and I hope you all are hanging in there and ready to engage in the conversation tonight. We have the honor of having one of my favorite AEI fellows here with us tonight. A lot of you have probably heard him before. Tim Carney is a visiting fellow at AEI, where he works on economic competition, cronyism, civil society, localism, and religion in America. He's concurrently the commentary editor at the Washington Examiner down in DC. His forthcoming book, which we have nicely displayed over here, is Alienated America: Why Some Places Thrive and While Others Collapse, which will be published by HarperCollins on February 19th, so just 10 days from now. His previous books include Obamonomics and The Big Ripoff, which was awarded the 2008 Culture of Enterprise Award by the Intercollegiate Studies Institute. In addition to his Washington Examiner columns, Mr. Carney's work has been published in a variety of magazines, websites, and newspapers. He's been a journalist for nearly 20 years, including The Atlantic, New York Post, The New York Times, and Reason, as well as The Wall Street Journal. His television appearances include CNBC, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and PBS NewsHour. He has a bachelor's degree from St. John's College in Annapolis. So Tim is going to lead us in a talk on his new book, and then we'll engage in a conversation after that. So if you could please join me in welcoming Tim Carney.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank all of you for coming. As Tyler said, I'm a journalist, as well as they call me a scholar at AEI. Some people put that in quotation marks, but I'm a full-time journalist, and so what I have is a story to tell. And it's a story about the American dream, specifically where and with whom the American dream seems alive and where the American dream is dead. And so it's a story about work. It's a story about family. It's a story about faith. It's also a story about how Donald Trump became the president of the United States, which hopefully means it's an interesting story. And because I'm a political reporter, the story begins in Iowa. And because I am an Irish Catholic, the story begins in a bar. At a sports bar called Joe's Place in Iowa City, a few weeks before the 2016 caucus, I met a couple, and they were Iowa natives, and she was a professor at the university there, but she was from a town in Iowa called Orange City. Now, as I said, I'm Irish, and I'm sort of obsessed with people's ethnicities and backgrounds and all that stuff, and so the word orange can sometimes trigger an Irish Catholic, if you guys know anything about the history here. So I said, is that orange like the Ulstermen? Is Orange City full of a bunch of Northern Irish Protestants who are marching all the time? And she said, no, the orange represents the Dutch heritage. So I, again, piqued by the ethnicity here, I said, so exactly how Dutch is Orange City, Iowa? And she said, let me put it this way. When I was a kid, I would literally put on wooden clogs and march past these windmills in the middle of our town in Iowa for the tulip parade. It was like a Simpsons episode making fun of Dutch people in Middle America. And so I was just intrigued. I didn't know any of this existed. So I had to go up there. I went up to Orange City in Sioux County, and I went to an event at Dordt College. It was a Jeb Bush rally. So everybody I met was named Holly Van something, and it was overwhelmingly Dutch. But it was also, here was the interesting thing, at this Republican event, very conservative town, it was overwhelmingly, in the early caucuses, anti-Donald Trump. There was one questioner who wouldn't even say his name. said, oh, well, there's one contender whose initials are DT who says we need to build a wall. And the crowd sort of hisses at even the mention of the initials DT. I went up to one pastor afterwards. He said, there's 900 people in my congregation every Sunday, and I know of one who is voting for Donald Trump. He said, there's even more Democrats in my congregation than there are Trump supporters, and that was a lot. So, and sure enough, Trump bombed in Orange City and in Sioux County, Iowa. This place where 50% of the population, it's a Dutchess county of all of America. He got 11%. Trump's other worst counties in Iowa included two other heavily Dutch counties, Marion and Lyon County. So we political analysts are always talking about, here is the Cuban vote, or the Hispanic vote, or the black vote, or the soccer mom vote, or the labor union vote. And now I was realizing there might actually be a Dutch vote. So come March, I look at Western Michigan. There's a city in Western Michigan you guys might know of called Holland, Michigan. And there's these 5 counties out there where it's from anywhere from 30% to 50% in some of these towns Dutch. Sure enough, Trump just utterly bombs in Western Michigan. He finishes 3rd place in Ottawa County, which is a home to Holland. And so I really needed to sort of figure out what was going on there. So when I'd been at Dordt College, I'd asked this one professor, or the husband of one professor, I said, what makes some people here tick? What makes this different than the rest of rural Iowa? And he said, well, when I moved here, somebody explained it to me well. He said, here in Sioux County, people vote right, meaning they're conservative, but live left. And all of a sudden, I was like, what does he mean, live left? Are these a bunch of like vegan pot-smoking swingers? What's going on? I want to get his exact quote. He said, no, that's just what you do. You take care of your neighbors. You care about your environment, but you also take care of it yourself. And so I'm really annoyed. I'm a conservative guy. I was really annoyed that he thought taking care of your neighbors was living left. But I set aside my annoyance at that to realize what he meant. The sense of community in Sioux Center, which is where Dordt College was, also in Sioux County, and in Orange City, also in Sioux County, was incredibly strong. The sense of duty to one's neighbor was very high. Social trust was incredibly high in these places. The New Yorker in 2017 ran a profile of Orange City. What they said, sort of channeling the pitch that Orange City people make for people to move back, says, there are plenty of jobs. It'll take you 5 minutes to drive to work. When you have children, we'll help you take care of them. People here share your values. It's a good Christian place, and they care about you. If anything happens, they'll have your back. So it began to become clear to me what was going on here. After Western Michigan, after Sioux County, the guy who was declaring the American dream was dead, Donald Trump, was bombing in the places where the American dream was most alive. So I really needed to figure out what was going on here. And obsessed with the Dutch thing, I found this Dutch town in Wisconsin. So ahead of the Wisconsin primaries, I went up to the village of Oostburg, which in Dutch means Eastburg, I guess. It's a village that's about 50% Dutch. I got there on a Sunday morning, planted myself at Judy's Place, a diner right there in the middle of town. And finally there, sitting there all day on a Sunday, I saw what should have been very obvious from the beginning. It was families coming in after the 9 or 10 a.m. service at the Christian Reformed Church, or from Bethel Orthodox Presbyterian, or from the First Reformed Church of Oostburg, or from the First Presbyterian Church of Oostburg. 4 churches in the Reformed Calvinist tradition in a village of 2,000. But guess what? They came to Judy's, they went home, and then at 8 o'clock that night, they all went back to church. That's part of, in some of these Reformed traditions, that's part of what you do on a Sunday. So suddenly I realized, thinking back, Dordt College was a Christian college. Holland, Michigan, the home of Hope and Calvin College, where I'll be going in a few weeks. It's the churches, the Christian colleges, the Christian high schools, and all the institutions that spin out of the churches in this town were what made these places, these really strong places where the American dream was alive, which then in turn led these conservative Republican places to their rejection of Trump. And of course, it wasn't just the Dutch, of course. Trump's worst state was Utah. His worst counties in the country were Mormon counties in places like Idaho and Utah. And I also saw closer to home. Trump carried most of my area of Silver Spring, Maryland, but there were 2 precincts I saw that voted overwhelmingly for Ted Cruz. And there were the 2 precincts, these 2 roads, Arcola Avenue and Kemp Mill intersect in Silver Spring. There's an Arcola modern Orthodox synagogue and a Kemp Mill modern Orthodox synagogue. These 2 precincts are, there's a prohibition on driving on the Sabbath among the Orthodox Jews. And so they were forced by their rules into this close confines where they built this same high social trust, this same connectivity. And those 2 precincts also rejected Trump. So again, throughout these places where the American dream seemed alive, drawn together by these church communities, Donald Trump, even in conservative Republican places, was bombing. Quick story about the Orthodox Jewish neighborhoods. We live right there. We have 6 kids. I said we were Irish Catholic. We have 6 kids. And so my wife occasionally has a thing that happens to her. She's checking out at the grocery store with the kids with her, and she's buying like a bunch of ground beef. The checkout person will be, ma'am, I'm sorry, that's actually not the kosher beef. That's over in the other section. Because if you're showing up with like brown curly hair and brown eyes and 6 kids, they just assume that you're Orthodox Jewish. So she always has to try to tell them. And when she tries to buy the Italian sausage that has pork in it, like people are almost physically restraining her from buying it. So trust me, we appreciate it. Anyway, the same day Cruz carries those Jewish neighborhoods in Silver Spring, I actually drove about 10 miles down the road to the village of Chevy Chase. Now, Chevy Chase kind of came into the news because Brett Kavanaugh grew up in Chevy Chase, but he grew up in sort of lesser Chevy Chase. You guys might not know this. This is in Maryland, in Montgomery County, same as my county, but there's a town of Chevy Chase. There's a Chevy Chase Section 5. I don't know if there's 1 through 4 or 6 through 10, but that's where Brett Kavanaugh grew up. The village of Chevy Chase is the real elite place. It is the wealthiest municipality in the wealthiest region, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Village of Chevy Chase, like the village of Oostburg, Wisconsin, is about 2,000. And like the average home in Oostburg is $150,000. Average home in Chevy Chase, $1.5 million. Mean household income is $420,000 in the village of Chevy Chase. Donald Trump got 54% statewide in my state of Maryland. He got 16% in Chevy Chase. The elites were rejecting Trump. In addition to losing Western Michigan, go back to Michigan, he lost Grosse Pointe, which some of you guys have heard of, the wealthy stretch, very badly. He lost Ann Arbor. He didn't get 20% just as he didn't get 20% in Sioux and Marion counties, the Dutch counties in Iowa, he didn't get 20% in Johnson and Story County, Iowa. Now, if some of you are coastal elites like me, you might not realize it. Johnson and Story County, Iowa are 2 of the 25 most highly educated counties in America. So you have this broad rejection. And in Wisconsin, I mentioned Oostburg. Trump also got trounced in Waukesha, Ozaukee, Washington counties, upper middle class suburbs around Milwaukee. So here I need to address something that I call the Lena Dunham fallacy. The Lena Dunham fallacy is a false belief that liberal elites are these anti-family decadents who like graduate from Wesleyan and then go out and just refuse to get married, and maybe they have children, maybe they don't, and that every time you look at a statistic about Americans are getting married less or the number of abortions and all that stuff, there's a lot of conservatives who assume, oh yeah, these are these white, rich Lena Dunhams of the world graduating from elite schools. And it's not true. If this guy in Sioux County is allowed to say that the Sioux County people live left, I'm going to say of a lot of the liberal elite places like Chevy Chase, well, they vote left, but they live right. And by that I mean they finish school, get married, have children, stay married, stay involved in their kids' life, and increasingly get involved in their communities. And then stay involved in their kids' lives as they do the same. This is what the elites, liberal or conservative in America, are doing. The data on the elites tell this story. 50% of babies born to working class moms, that means mothers who don't have college degrees, 50% of them are born out of wedlock. Among college-educated mothers, only 10% Only 10%. So it is definitely an exception to have an out-of-wedlock birth if you are in the elite defined by having a college degree. If you're the parent in an upper third of income, your children are half as likely to have a child out of wedlock as parents in the lower third. College-educated men are much more likely to get married, and college-educated men are half as likely to get divorced. So what I would tell the conservatives who believe in the Lena Dunham fallacy is the liberal elites are practicing what we conservatives are preaching. So here we kind of see two different types of places that rejected Trump. Orange City, Holland, Michigan, Salt Lake City, Kent Mill, or Chevy Chase, Ann Arbor, Wauwatosa, Michigan, the conservative, religious, and the elites. But I argue that they're not two different types of places. They're one type of place. And that is a place with strong institutions of civil society. I could say strong community, but I mean something a bit more precise than that. They have institutions, whether it's a church or a synagogue, or something that spins off of a church or a synagogue, or a strong public school, or elite private school, or country club, or sports team. Those are the institutions that bring them together. And so, the affliction of the working class, the root of the idea that the American dream is dead, is this. Too many places have too few of these robust institutions of civil society. And so the people there are left alienated. They lack a safety net. They lack a sense of purpose. They lack connection to their fellow people. They lack good modeling, and they, in the end, lack access to the good life. Now, I think alienated is the right word. It's in my book title. My 8-year-old asked me, which type of alien are you talking about? Are you talking about the ones who come from another planet who probably don't exist, Dad? Or are you talking about people who just come from another country? And it was an interesting, I was like, how did you even know the term alien for like illegal aliens or whatever? And I said, actually, it means people who were born here but feel like they're either living on a foreign planet or living in another country. So why? What does community do? I'm going to posit it does a lot more than most of you probably think, because it has strong institutions have been the air that you drink, air that you breathe, and the water that you drink. That you don't realize, if you're in college, right now you are living in an environment where you are intensely connected, living next door to work, doing your daily work with other people, many of whom are like-minded in at least one way or another, who are engaged in the same pursuit you are. You have daily serendipitous encounters with friends and neighbors that lead to all sorts of unexpected fruit. That's connection. That's about the pinnacle of connection. And the fact that you're in college means you're statistically likely to have grown up in a strong public school or a private school, to have had college-educated parents, to have been tied in with sports teams and clubs. So the water, the air that you breathe, if you're a fish, the water that you're swimming in, you sometimes don't even notice it. But that's what strong civil society is. So what do these institutions do? I start the book with a personal story. It's about my daughter, Eve. She's now 2. This happened a little more than a year ago where she was getting sick. And one of the weird things about being a parent is when your little kids get sick, they just want to cuddle with you. So you have this sort of perverse pleasure from the kid being sick where you feel really bad because they're very cuddly. But on a Sunday morning, I had gone with the older kids to the 8:30 Mass. Again, one of the beautiful things about being a Catholic is there's like 6, 7, 8 Masses throughout the day. So I went to the 8:30 with the older kids because there's no way we could bring Eve because she was looking a little bit sick. And that allows us to leave home Sean, who, as you can tell by his Irish name, is basically a terrorist. So we don't want to bring him to Mass. So my wife then is by herself at the 11:30 Mass, and Eve starts looking worse and worse. And I had bought, almost on a whim a few months before, one of those pulse oximeters. It measures the oxygen content of your blood. And I put it on her, and it was down below 90%. And so I just Googled that, and they're just like, it's really bad if it's down below 90%. So I tried calling my wife. She doesn't have the phone turned on because it's Mass. And she, though, had brought the minivan because she didn't, and they had the car seats and all that stuff. So I just put my daughter in a stroller. I text my wife, I'm taking Eve to the urgent care center. And I'm like running down Georgia Avenue in Silver Spring. And my wife, anyway, so Eve ends up in the hospital. And so I start the story at 4 a.m., looking with gratitude at these machines that are finally pumping enough oxygen into Eve's lungs to keep her alive. And I say, at 4 a.m., though, that machine and the PICU nurses had to share my attention and gratitude. My thoughts were filled in that hour with the help we were getting from friends and neighbors during our stay, which would stretch from Sunday to Thursday. My colleagues at the Examiner had barbecue, which I love, delivered to me for lunch on Monday. One colleague delivered beer and dark chocolate to the PICU, to the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit, to make the stay more bearable for Katie and me. One friend in Virginia had so much food delivered to her house from the corner bakery, sandwiches, salads, chips, cold cuts, that we ate dinner and lunch from the platter for more than a week. My kids were the envy of St. Andrew Apostle School because of the quality of lunch sandwiches they were bringing in from the corner bakery. America's Future Foundation, an organization I'd served on their board for many years, sent a gift card for ordering dinner from Grubhub for our whole family. My mother-in-law brought chicken pot pie. She also repeatedly came to watch the kids while my wife and I drove to and from the hospital to trade off shifts with Eve. Katie's younger sister and her husband sat a shift with our kids, as did other friends in our parish and another neighbor. With us unable to fulfill our carpool duties, the other parents took on extra trips and went out of their way to pick up our son. We got so many offers of help or food, I felt guilty about my inability to even field them all. The gospel verse that ran through my mind, the Bible verse, was, "My cup runneth over." In the moment, waking up at 4 a.m. with a sore neck in the tiny curtain booth of the PICU, I had an image of a swarm of friends, family, neighbors rallying to our aid. As I considered it more, though, it wasn't a swarm. I saw in greater detail the contours of this support. When a nurse would ask me about somebody who brought something, I realized these weren't simple bilateral relationships. There was always an institution that linked us. Again, this wasn't how we thought about our friends generally. They were just our friends. But whenever I described to others the help we got, I found myself speaking of the couple from our parish, the family from our pool. Some help came from parents at the same boys' school where our oldest sons go. Others were my college classmates. Others were my work colleagues at the Examiner or AEI. Parents of the kids I'd coached in baseball. The woman who sent the corner bakery feast is in my wife's book club, and so on. I realized that this is what these institutions did. They were a safety net that I never noticed because I hadn't been calling on it. But that's, for so many people, the first safety net. Your car breaks down, you need somebody to jump it. It's going to be a next door neighbor whom hopefully you have a good connection with. Your kid needs a ride to school. Again, the neighbor, the parish, the club that you belong to, your kid's baseball team, all of those things. So it's a safety net. But in addition to sort of what it provides below you, it's what it provides above you. It's a sense of purpose. They rope you into doing things. I'm involved in lots of things, many of them not because I sign up and volunteer, but because somebody says, hey, we need a kindergarten girls basketball coach. And so I ended up coaching kindergarten girls basketball last year, which is as ridiculous as it sounds. It's absurd. And then there's lots of research else about what communities do. When it comes to economic mobility, the ability to climb up the ladder, there was a researcher, Raj Chetty, who looked at it, and he said that of all the things that can make kids in this place be more likely to do better than their parents, stuff like money spent on public education really didn't have much of an effect. Stuff like crime, if you worked in other factors, didn't have much of an effect. The two things that had the biggest effect were the percent of intact families in the neighborhood. Separate from whether the child was growing up with two parents, the percent of intact families in a neighborhood made a child much more likely to be able to do better than his parents economically. But also measures of social capital, measures of how many churches, how many neighborhood associations, how involved people were in their neighbors' lives and in institutions. So what does community do? It's a safety net. It provides a sense of purpose. It provides modeling and connectivity that allows for upward mobility. So I've talked about the good stuff. So now this is the bad stuff. So a quick aside, as a political reporter, I do a lot of what I call bar reporting, which is, as I mentioned, in Iowa, you go to a bar and you talk to the people there. And over my first few years of doing this, I realized some bars were better than others. You go to a college bar, sorry to say, it's not a great place to do political reporting. At this point in my career, I'm the creepy old guy at the college bar. But then B, they're from out of state. College kids don't vote at a very high rate, and all of that. You go to a bar. I once went to a bar, and it was all immigrants, and they had political opinions, but none of them were registered to vote. Half of them were brand new to the country, very excited about being Americans and saying they would vote in a future presidential election once they got their citizenship. There are some bars that were better than others. I used to mostly go to what I called yuppie Irish pubs, because you had liberals, you had conservatives, you had centrists, you had men, you had women, you had black, you had white, you had Hispanic, you had a whole variety of things. What you didn't have was working class whites who hadn't gone to college. And so I was missing them. And then when Trump went to the top of the polls, I had to start going to some of those places to get a good sampling. So I went to one called Smitty's Bar and Grill in Uniontown, Pennsylvania. I chose in Uniontown because it was in Fayette County. I chose Fayette County because somebody had done a study on the drop-off of religious attendance and religious observance in counties in Pennsylvania, and Fayette had the biggest drop-off among both evangelicals and Catholics. And so that's why I went to Fayette. I went to Smitty's because, well, God bless Yelp. They said the best wings in all of southwestern Pennsylvania are in Smitty's, and they had excellent wings. But I go there to sort of suss out what I had a strong feeling this place had been, this county that had been a tie. They had voted equally for Obama and for McCain in 2008. I had a strong feeling that there was going to be Trump country. And sure enough, every single person in the bar was white, and every single person in the bar was voting for Donald Trump. And as I talked to them, I said, so how's it? A lot of times if you just ask them about politics, they don't talk. So I asked them about the economy. How's the economy? They're going on. And then they instantly start complaining about sort of welfare cheats. Oh, well, I saw this woman, or not I saw. I heard, my neighbor told me he saw this woman try to buy dog food with her food stamps, and since they wouldn't let her, she just bought another T-bone steak, and her dog ate sirloin for dinner. Or, you know, I have these next door neighbors who I know use their unemployment money to buy drugs. So this talk is going on, complaining about these people just sort of sucking up all the wealth of the country. And not explicitly, but there was certainly a racial undertone to the welfare cases they were complaining about. So one of my techniques as a reporter I call being kind of a jerk. It's where you sort of prod people a little bit. So at one point, this guy, Dave, who's complaining about it, I said, Dave, it's Tuesday at 2:30, and you're sitting at the bar. He said, well... Now, some people at this point out that it was Tuesday and 2:30, and I was sitting at the bar. But remember, it's my job to do this. And I said, but like, and he was about 50. I said, so, he said, well, I'm on unemployment. I said, why are you on unemployment? He said, well, I'm in disability. Guess what? Fayette County also had the highest rate of disability in all of Pennsylvania. And he said, well, my back, I can't stand up. I can't sit at a desk for hours. I said, but you've been sitting at this bar stool for hours, Dave. Again, this is me being a reporter. I'm normally not a jerk like this to people in regular life, but you're trying to prod out of them what they're doing. You've been sitting at this bar stool for a couple hours, Dave. And he says, yeah, well, I'm numb because my son died this morning. It was opioids, and it was not rare, actually, in Uniontown or Fayette County. It's not even one of the top 10 counties as far as opioid overdoses, but it's rising. Now it is one of the top 10, and it's the sort of thing that is increasingly prevalent in rural America. And it was sort of this shock to me of seeing that the alienation that's going on in these places isn't just manifesting itself in sort of an economic downturn, but in a real loss of access to the good life. Dave was only still in Uniontown because that's where his mom lived. She had Social Security. He took care of her because nobody else would, and he lived under his roof because he didn't have income to pay for himself. His son was sort of up and coming, he thought he had gotten off of the drugs. He was learning better, higher tech equipment in construction before this happened. But that's when I realized that this really isn't just a political story or an economic story. This is a much deeper story. There's been a 50% increase in deaths of despair, whether it's opioid overdoses, deaths from alcohol, or deaths from suicide. The primary places where this increase is happening is among working class, middle-aged whites in middle America. It's the type of people who are in and around Smitty's. And then the younger generation in their 20s and 30s of that same cohort are getting married less, they're getting divorced more, and this is where you find most of the women, millennial women who have not graduated from college, their first birth, a vast majority of them are outside of wedlock, and they never get married. So this, I argue, is the consequence of alienation. This is a consequence of the loss of community, the loss of the places that make marriage more doable. My wife and I wouldn't be able to take care of all our kids and do all the things we do if we didn't have these strong institutions around them. So what happens if you take it away? The people don't get married. Men don't find a purpose in their life. The women who are stuck raising the kids don't have the support in their life. They lose the safety net and the sense of purpose. And it ends up looking like a lot of this in rural America. That's the alienation that happens from, and not just rural America, a lot of suburban America. If you read Hillbilly Elegy, that's what that's about. Middle America suburb that doesn't have the strong institutions. What's one of the defining traits of Mamaw, the grandmother in Hillbilly Elegy? She's Christian, but she doesn't go to church. She's not connected to other things. So why does this happen? I would say two things that sound like opposites, but are the two sides of the same coin. One is hyper-individualism, and the other is over-centralization. Again, one sounds like atomization, one's a centrifugal force, one's a centripetal force. Tocqueville argued that they were the same side of the same coin, that the more over-centralization you have, the more atomization you have. One thing, government gets bigger, the welfare state, it crowds out these institutions of civil society. For the people at Smitty's, there was a welfare state. Even though they never would have admitted it and they cursed all the other people who took it, there were the paycheck, the food stamps, the unemployment, the disability, the Medicaid. But that doesn't keep Dave's son from overdosing. But what does the big government do? It ends up crowding out the local institutions of civil society. Jonathan Gruber, who some of you might remember from the Obamacare debate, who was famous for saying, oh, Obamacare, we had to bank on the idiocy of people to come up with our messaging for this. So he's not a conservative, he's a liberal, but he did a study into crowding out, and he found that as government spending increased, church spending on welfare programs decreased. And as government spending decreased after welfare reform, church spending on welfare programs increased. So when the government crowds out this private spending, the total number of dollars for the poor and the needy goes up, but the institutions available to them go down. And I would argue that this is a net cost and a net negative, not total negative. More money for starving, hungry, poor, sick people who can't work because they're physically unable is a good thing. But fewer institutions that provide them with a sense of purpose, with modeling and with connectivity is a deadly thing, is what I would argue. And then also there's the question of mass media as over-centralization. People now, you tune on and everybody's watching the national news. Or if you're watching local news, you're watching somebody else's local news, like in Virginia. I mean, you guys, if you've been following politics at all, you now know the name of the lieutenant governor of Virginia. Well, you probably don't know the name of the lieutenant governor of your own state. You know the name, you know what outfits the governor of Virginia wore when he was in medical school, while most people, half the country, probably couldn't name their own governor. Why? National news has drawn all this attention to Washington or whatever the big national story is, and drawn people's attention away from what's at hand, their neighborhood, their community, the things on which they can actually have an impact. These are two stories of over-centralization that I think kill civil society. Hyper-individualism, technology, your phone, your ability to delve into and form your own world makes it easier for you to ignore the people actually physically around you, to shape your own world. Even the dating apps that allow you to sort of select by a profile or this or that, they spare you from the hard work of going out and meeting 100 other people to actually find what's going to be right for you. And I argue the hyper-individualism of the sexual revolution, the idea that we're getting away from the idea of man and a woman coming together to form a family as part of a community, to both marriage being a temporary bond, but also just the divorce of sex from marriage, I think, is another instance of this, of eroding the demand for marriage. To put it sort of as gently as I can, the benefits of getting married for men go down when the availability of sex outside of marriage goes up. And I think that that's one of the things happening. And on the note of the sexual revolution and the idea of hyper-individualism and over-centralization being the same thing, there was something that came out during the Obama campaign in 2012. It was called The Life of Julia. Now, some of you may have heard of this, but it's a little old, perhaps, for some people in this room. But it was this cartoon that the Obama campaign put out to advertise for all sorts of Obama things, including the contraceptive mandate, which was forcing all employers to provide contraception. Julia was this woman who didn't have a face. And she's like born, and she gets all this help from Obama in one way or another. She goes to school, and Obama's education things benefit her. She goes off to college, and she gets subsidies for student loans from Obama. And then the next frame is she gets a job as a computer programmer, and then she gets, her employer has to provide her with birth control that's 100% paid for. And then in the next frame, Julia decides to have a child. Literally, the child is the only other human being who appears in this whole cartoon. There's no father. It's like a virgin birth, but it's the federal government that's the father in this case. This woman, because of large central government, lives this whole life without meeting other people. That's the sort of the goal that the Obama campaign in 2012 was putting forward. But also, if you remember the contraceptive mandate fight, one of the lawsuits that the Obama administration got caught up in was the Little Sisters of the Poor. This was an order of nuns who had employees, and they said, we don't think we should be required to provide birth control for our employees. And the Obama administration wouldn't give in, and so they went to court. But this, I think, is part of one of the huge causes of alienation and the destruction of civil society, and that's secularization. Secularization happens on many fronts. One, churches failing. I'm a Catholic, and my church has failed horrendously on the score of keeping predators away from children. And when I run into people in bars who say, oh, I used to be a Catholic, but then this stuff started happening 15 years ago and I walked away, I actually don't have the ability to sort of evangelize and try to bring them back in. It has this effect of shutting me up. And my church isn't the only one who's failed, and that's not the only score where they failed. But also secularization happens because of cultural changes, technological changes. Also, secularization happens because of a mindset that's prevalent in Europe and increasingly prevalent over here, that churches should only function on their Sabbath, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever it is, and they should only stick to worship. Obama loved to say freedom of worship. Freedom of worship is not in the Constitution. It's free exercise of religion. And I'm a Christian, and my religion requires me to love my neighbor. And loving my neighbor means building these institutions around them. And if Nancy Pelosi said in defending the contraceptive mandate, well, I do my religion on Sundays. That's not, you can't do your religion on Sundays. If you have a religion, you have to do it 24/7. You have to live that way. The idea that church should be pushed back, synagogues, mosques should be pushed back to their own little corner, that's a secularization push coming largely from big government forces. And what it's doing is destroying the main institution of civil society that is available to the middle class and the working class. And thus, it's creating these landscapes of alienation where there isn't social capital, where there isn't connectivity, where there isn't a sense of purpose, and where there isn't a local safety net. And so that, I think, is what got us where we are. So secularization has been tolerable for the elites of Chevy Chase. They've got other things, country clubs, sports teams. It's been deadly for the middle classes. So the last section of every book, every speech is supposed to be about solutions. So my first solution would be this. Now, first of all, I'm a conservative, so solutions are not necessarily my strong point. My very first book was on corporate welfare. And one guy who criticized it said, you're reading the book and it's just like export-import bank bad, sugar bad, spending bad, tax credits bad, ethanol bad, and then it's the index. He expected there to be a here's how to solve it thing, and I didn't have it. But there are solutions, and I'm going to talk about them right now. Number one, stop trying to drive religion out of the public square. You may not like other people's religion. You may worry about the separation of church and state. Fine. Separation of church and state doesn't mean that church isn't allowed in the public square. The public square and the state are two different things. This public square predated the state. So that's my first solution, is to plead with people, plead with my liberal friends who care about the poor. Stop trying to drive churches, synagogues, and mosques out of the public square. Two is to decentralize the safety net. I'm not saying government shouldn't play a role. And actually, the federal government needs to play a role in the safety net, because when there's a depression or a recession, then the private entities have less money. When this country has much poorer regions than others, so there needs to be geographic redistribution. But as much as possible, decentralize it so that the people providing care are providing it as close to the human level as possible. And then there's other things that government is necessarily involved with, just the way we build communities, we build roads, we build houses. Currently, they're built for cars and not for people. And that makes it harder to have the sort of serendipitous encounters that you're more likely to have on a college campus. And so there are lots of people who talk about intentional communities, or Rod Dreher wrote a book called The Benedict Option, and there's communes. And these things are largely about just being together where you can run into your neighbors. And as a parent, what's incredibly valuable is to be able to leave your kids without having to plan it way ahead of time. Stop subsidizing big houses with the air conditioning, the TVs, the coffee makers. That drags us away from our neighbors. That happens more than the free market would prescribe because of all sorts of government and tax policies. Local control of public schools is a big one. Right now, in Montgomery County, where I live, the county controls everything. So these aren't, they're not public in the sense that the public controls them. They're government schools. They're not local schools. That's a big shift that needs to happen. The way labor unions are organized right now is from a model from Friedrich Taylor, where he was this guy who's put forth this idea that the employers should treat workers like cogs in a machine. So then how do labor unions respond? By treating the employers like enemies. Guess what? If somebody's treating you like a machine, they kind of are an enemy. So our federal laws about that are set up in this inherently adversarial and exploitative format. Northern Europe has a labor union system where it's more voluntary, where the unions are able to provide more value. For instance, they provide unemployment insurance. Reforming the laws around unions would do it. But there is no big solution, certainly not a big federal solution. For one thing, again, because over-centralization would be self-defeating in this regard. When what we need are small communities to grow back up, there's no make the small communities grow act of 2019 that can pass through Congress. So that's one of the depressing things. But so who and what can fix this? And the answer is regular people, which doesn't mean regular people out there. It means you guys. You're in college. You have an idea of success down the line, some more clear than others. It's going to have to do with career, maybe. It's going to have to do with family. I'm going to ask you, have your idea of success have to do with community, with building something, building the infrastructure that makes formation of families and access to the good life realistic for other people? When you think about what the success is going to be, you're making a lot of money ultimately doesn't make people a lot happier. There's lots of statistics. Above $75,000 income doesn't increasingly make you happy. So I just learned today, I grew up in Greenwich Village before I moved out to the New York suburbs. There was a dormitory across the street from me in NYU called Hayden Hall that's now been renamed Lipton Hall. Lipton. It's named Lipton because a billionaire gave a lot of money to the school, and so they slapped the name on that. I want to talk about another name. It's Terrence McCardle. I don't even know who Terrence McCardle is, but when I drop my kids off at St. Andrew Apostle School every day, there is a Terrence McCardle athletic fields. Because Terrence, at my parish, Terrence McCardle, 20, 30 years ago, whenever it was, I know the kind of guy he is because I run into guys like him around my county, around my town, all the time. He's a guy who went out and made there be a baseball diamond at St. Andrew Apostle. He's the guy who coached multiple baseball teams and soccer teams there at St. Andrew Apostle. St. Andrew is a great parish. It's very strong. And that doesn't just mean that we have, a good choir. We actually don't have a good choir. We're recording this, I guess. That's bad. We have a wonderful choir. The choir is the best. It's because it's created these institutions that provide connectivity and a sense of purpose. So instead of aiming to be Mr. and Mrs. Lipton who have enough money to pay for a dorm, aim to be like Terrence McCardle who gets a local ball field named after you because you started and ran t-ball teams that allowed parents to come and meet other parents, that allowed a single mom to have a place to drop off her kid for an hour to actually get shopping. Or if you don't get a ball field named after you, if you make your own neighborhood, because of your success, because of your successful marriage or anything like that, if you make your own neighborhood feel like this is a good place to raise a kid. There are a lot of places people say that about. Sometimes it means they're really rich. But if it's because there are neighborhood potlucks, because there's always somebody walking around with a stroller, because the neighbors all know each other, because somebody started an email listserv, somebody says, yeah, this is a good place to have a kid. So we got married and we had a family. There might be a couple that gets married and has a kid, or 6 kids, because you were the one who made it be the kind of neighborhood where that could happen. That's the sort of thing that I want you to look for as a success. And I'm not saying that work and career success won't be part of that. It will be. You could be a great leader, a great boss who inspires the people you work for or connects them and does all that. But that connectivity, that solving of alienation, that prevention of alienation, that I think is where you'll find real success. That'll be the real problem, the real solution to alienation, which is the real problem that plagues America. So there's no big solution. There's a million small solutions, and in this room, hopefully there's about 100 solutions. Thank you guys very much.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, so I'm just going to ask a couple quick questions to get the conversation going, but then we'll turn it over to you pretty quick. One of the points that I think you made tonight and you make in the book is that in lower to middle class communities, as opposed to upper middle class elite communities, the upper middle class has all sorts of different civil society institutions, Little League, the country club, whatever it might be, and the lower middle class, I think you argue that the church and kind of religious communities are really like it's that, or oftentimes there's nothing else.
Correct.
In a lot of those communities. In thinking about that and kind of putting the church as a central institution in those lower middle class communities, I'm thinking about kind of the increase in religious unaffiliation in America and the West more broadly. And looking at some of the outliers of that are the Church of Latter-day Saints is one huge one. I was just talking with our colleague Daniel Cox the other day who studies this stuff. And really, the reason why he argued that the Church of Latter-day Saints has not gone through this kind of collapse is because of strong families that pass down the faith, pass down the traditions, and teach their kids to value community and the traditions of their faith. So I guess I'm wondering, is it really church and religion that allow us to have strong families, as I think you argued early, or is it the families that allow us to have, or what's the kind of causal relationship?
It goes both ways, but I would say that I want to make a clarification about the importance of religion. a lot of the studies. So, if any of you guys have ever heard of the book Bowling Alone, the author was Robert Putnam. It was about the erosion of these community institutions. He wrote a follow-up book called American Grace with David Campbell, who is a Mormon academic at University of Notre Dame. And what they found, all these positive effects of religion, but specifically attendance, going to church, not the strength of your belief or your adherence to your religion's teachings necessarily to the degree those could be measured, but attendance, which I think is a decent proxy for belonging and connection. And so I would say, on the one thing, the question of causality, strong families are an essential building block of strong communities. But again, strong communities are a necessary framework. So when I'm talking to a conservative audience, I usually emphasize that latter one because conservatives sometimes are too over individualistic when it comes to family. When Hillary wrote a book called It Takes a Village to Raise a Child, I mean, my reaction was, she just wants to socialize a family and take my kids away from me and indoctrinate them in leftism. And whether that was right or wrong, then I realized years later, especially as a dad, the simple phrase, it takes a village to raise a child, is true. Rick Santorum responded with a book called It Takes a Family. And it can be very tempting for conservatives to say the family is the fundamental unit, which is true, but then to overly diminish the degree to which families need the community. So the causality goes both ways. And the positive effect of the religious institutions, I think, is in building the communities on a small local human level that are the infrastructure that makes family more doable and that then yields more family formation.
Mm-hmm. How do you go about making the case for these religious communities without, obviously proselytizing or it's obviously a personal, spiritual, intellectual thing. It's not just a pragmatic decision for people to invest in those types of communities. And is it really true that in these lower middle class communities, there wouldn't be the possibility for secular civil society to play a similar role that the church has played?
So yeah, I mean, you can't just go and, I mean, wasn't there a Seinfeld episode where one of the characters became Jewish for the jokes? You can't become Jewish for the jokes, and you can't go and become Mormon for the potlucks. You're supposed to believe in what they're teaching. So I obviously can't make that, but I would say that that's why, especially in the American South, there's a lot of people who have a strong religiosity but not a belonging and attendance. So I could certainly persuade them, you're not living your life as a Christian unless you're actually going and belonging. But what's sort of the secular alternative? Well, first I had hinted towards one, local control of public schools. I'm from New York, and in New York and New England, the public schools really are controlled by towns and villages. And so they're public in the sense that the people are forming them and running them. That's sort of the best alternative I can come up with to that. But I would just say the fact of the matter is, in America, the working and middle class, the institutions that have provided the value and the good outcomes has always been church. And so there's no mandate that we get rid of, that we continue the march towards secularization. And so it seems to me that the clearest path towards reversing some of the bad trends would be reversing the trend of secularization.
Mm-hmm. How do you think about institutional renewal? So much of your talk is about the importance of institutions. Yet I think there's probably less trust in institutions, including churches, including government and local governments, including all sorts of different organizations, because people are bad and corrupt these institutions. How do you think about renewing these important institutions and kind of regaining people's trust in them?
So it has to happen on a human level. My own parish, when I came into the Catholic Church as an adult. The church where I started attending church was Saint Joseph's on Capitol Hill. The pastor there had already been accused of sexual abuse of a boy, and then later was removed after another accusation came in. When I did come into the church, it was through meeting with a priest at a small chapel in downtown and he's now been accused of fondling a woman. And I still came into the church somehow. And when you come into the Catholic Church, you're confirmed, even if he's not there, you're confirmed basically by the Archbishop, who was Cardinal Theodore McCarrick. And the founding pastor of my current parish that I've praised so much, St. Andrew, the founding pastor, has been credibly accused of sexual assault. So why do I still hold on to the church? Part of it is that my current pastor has expressed very clearly his outrage and anger at this complete breach of trust, and has done everything he can within our own parish to rebuild the trust. So on a human level, there are people in my parish who, if our parish were to disappear, would totally cease being Catholics. And for me, it would be hard, because then I would be left in this sea of the Archdiocese of Washington, where Cardinal Wuerl, who covered for McCarrick and covered for abusing priests in Pittsburgh, it would be the next level. It would be hard for me to hold on to it. I mean, my wife is a cradle Catholic. I think we'd still hold on to it. But the way you restore institutional trust is by doing it on the human level. Knowing that Father Dan is out there to be a good shepherd for us is what's done it for me. So you can't restore faith in the Catholic Church, but you can restore faith in St. Andrew Apostle Parish. You can't restore faith in the government, but you can run a local government in a responsive and compassionate way enough that somebody's like, well, I don't trust the government, but the city of Rockville actually does things right. So that's the way I'd approach it.
Mm-hmm. Before we turn it over to you, one last question. So you started this whole talk connecting it to politics and saying that this lack of civil society and people feeling like the American dream was dead pushed them to Trump and to, I would say, probably broader populist movements, both in the U.S. and in Europe. Where do you see kind of the political implications of this going? You know, what comes after Trump? How are these people reacting to what Trump is doing? So
it's complicated. First of all, I am on record saying there's no way Donald Trump is going to win the Republican nomination, and then saying no way he's going to beat Hillary Clinton. So take my political predictions here with a grain of salt. But secondly, I would say I don't think the problems of alienation I'm talking about, I don't think Donald Trump is or can address a lot of them. He has stopped a lot of the central government attack on the church, and that's been very positive. But his mindset is one of centralization, and he has had a rhetorical effect of the sort of stealing people's attentions away from what's around them and towards national politics, both more so his enemies, but also his allies. So if he doesn't legitimately turn around the problem of alienation, and I don't think he has the ability to, then what comes next, I think, is again going to be somebody seeking something of a strong man, whether it's a prosecutor from San Francisco who's out for blood, whether it's a second term of Trump, I don't know. But the fact is, as long as people are turning to Washington for their answers, it creates a self-perpetuating thing where that creates more alienation and makes it worse. So, yeah, we're back to the point where I'm the conservative with really sad way to end it. But, yeah.
All right. On that point, let's turn it over to you. Questions? How about right here?
Hi, Mr. This is on. Okay. Thank you for your talk. I'm Faye McKinday. I'm a junior at Penn. My question is about the places that you went to. So I went to high school in Lidditz, Pennsylvania, which is like central Pennsylvania, Lancaster County. So
what county, sorry?
Lancaster County. Yeah. So a lot of there's like a Smitty's type bar there as well, like a lot of similar types of issues. What do those people see, or in your experience, are they seeing in someone like Donald Trump, who kind of like, what are they seeing in him that they're not, that when they look at maybe their neighbor who's like taking advantage of welfare benefits, what are they not identifying? Does it have a racial tinge? Like what is that?
So a lot of things. One, So I've now been married for 13 years, and a lesson I've very slowly been learning is that when my wife talks about some malady or suffering or something like that, she's not asking me to solve the problem for her. I have a friend whose wife just said, I feel like I'm, gaining a little weight. And the husband said, well, then exercise more. That's not the right answer. You don't try to solve the problem. You acknowledge the problem. Politicians in Washington, particularly Republicans both parties, have not been willing to say the American dream is dead. Now, I don't think the American dream is dead, but in a third of the country it is. So just that. Life is falling apart in so many of these places. The acknowledgement of that is a big part of it. But as is the case with a lot of populist movements, now, okay, I'm not the kind of guy who uses populism as bad. My second book, the final chapter, the sort of solutions chapter, is like populism can be channeled for good. But a lot of populist movements are about saying there's two bad guys. One, these insiders who are hurting the regular people, and two, this sort of parasite class, whether it's illegal aliens or the welfare cases or that sort of thing. And so that's, I think that is part of it, that there's an idea. Our dads got to work in these factories. They didn't have to finish college. They finished high school. They go to a factory. If you're willing to put in 30 years, you got enough, and a little bit of overtime, you got enough money to raise a family, and probably before you retire, get a small lake cabin with a little fishing boat, and it's a good life. That gets taken away from us. Got taken away by lots of different forces. It was only there because of lots of different forces, like being protected from competition from workers in China, from immigrants from Mexico, to some extent from blacks and women. But they feel like something was taken away from them, and Trump taps into that. And when the response is, no, nothing was taken away from you, you backwards, deplorable hick, they say, yes, something was. And that's, I think, a big part of what Trump was able to tap into. So he was acknowledging a real suffering that other people were unwilling to acknowledge because there was sort of ugliness around the story behind the suffering.
Let's go straight back.
Hi, my name's Ethan. I'm from NYU, and I'm from a tiny town of 2,000 people in rural America. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, most people that I went to high school with, they don't want to go back to my community. They see it as a dying place. What can we do to kind of fight this idea of brain drain and be able to reinvigorate these communities without excessive government intervention?
Yeah, no, so that's one of the real hard questions. And so if we had our boss, Arthur Brooks, here, Arthur is very much about the American dream is getting up and moving. And I'm kind of telling the opposite story here, right? Like, it's about being connected to where you are. And I would say that, and the recurring phrase, sort of the preface, the foreword, or whatever you want to call it, there's an Old Testament phrase I have in here: seek the well-being of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, for in its well-being is your well-being. So seek the well-being of the city to which I have carried you. That's the prophet passing on the message. Prophet Jeremiah passing on the message from God. So where you are is what you have to look out for. So right now that's NYU, and it's your family. Where you land afterwards is a much more complicated choice. I'm not going to tell people, go back to your hometown and try to bring it back up from the ashes. Even J.D. Vance, who kind of said he was doing that, he's living in Columbus. I don't think he's actually living in Middletown. Maybe I'm wrong. And I know people who actually are trying to bring Middletown back up. Some of it has to do with the infrastructure that's already existing. Is there something there that you can plug into? Is there one strong church that you can plug into? Is there one strong main street that's actually thriving that you just need to bring more people to? But as far as government intervention, I just don't have a lot of faith that a sort of redevelopment grant is going to make a village of 2,000 turn around. It wasn't a grant, an influx of money that made Oostburg, or Orange City, Orange City. That's not to say there aren't some neighborhoods that could benefit from the redistribution of money. I would say this book made me a little less libertarian in that I think there might be cases where moving money from the wealthy parts of the state to the suffering parts of the state can do some good, but also it deepened my distrust of central planning in that regard. So I don't have a great answer for you except to say, if you think there's a path, if you can foresee a path of here's how to help my town by going back there, that would be a great thing to do. But there isn't always a path. Some of these places really are dying. Let's get something I can give a happier answer to.
When
All right. Hi, my name is Madeline, and I'm a master's student here at Penn. So I have kind of a two-part question. My first question is, I'm wondering if you have any recommendations, maybe for people who are truly secular or maybe truly atheist, for other civic institutions. And second, I was wondering what is your opinion on the role of social policy, such as perhaps abortion policy or gay marriage policy, that might be pulling people into or pulling people out of religious institutions?
First thing I would say is the defining nature of what I think are these important, crucial institutions of civil society is that it's a joint higher cause outside of yourself. And so, again, the two paths to that seem to be religiosity, which has a supernatural worldview. So there's clearly something higher and outside of yourself. Or increasingly in elite America, where it's almost statistically proven, like sabermetric type stuff, that this path of you finish school, even if it's not college, you finish school, you get a job, you get married, you stay married, and you get involved in your kid's life, provides good outcomes. That those two things are the two paths that sort of are a joint pursuit with neighbors of something higher. And what's the something higher in the latter case? In, say, Park Slope, Brooklyn, it's helping our children hopefully not just succeed in the terms of getting into an Ivy League school and but be good, well-adjusted citizens who help their neighbors and that sort of thing. So the main thing I would say for if you're looking for a secular thing is it's going to be the first step is, for the most part, it's going to be built around family and trying to help children, even if they're not your own children, if they're the neighborhood children. That was one of the things I saw in Oostburg. I asked the guy, he was at the bar in Judy's place, and he still had all this grease under his nails. And I remember a guy on my baseball team whose dad was an auto mechanic, and the grease was always there under the nails. And so I asked this guy, I said, what do you do? He said, well, I'm the mechanic for basically all the farms around Oostburg. I said, so do you like it? He said, I love it. I said, what's your biggest complaint? He said, you want to know what happened to me a few months ago? I showed up to my kid's Christmas concert at the public school, and there were no seats because all these people who didn't even have kids in the public school were taking up all the seats in the Christmas concert. So I see my neighbor, I say, Jimmy, what are you doing? I need a place to sit. I've been on my feet all day. And Jimmy says, and his wife say, we're not going to miss this Christmas concert. How would we miss our kids singing? Our kids. They didn't have children there. Our kids was a whole community. So that, I think, that's a phrase of another Robert Putnam book. That is, I think, going to be the core of most institutions of civil society, secular or religious. Look for a way to sort of make the community's children be our kids would be one of the things I would say. As far as the social teaching and how it results in people turning away from church and that sort of thing, there's religious institutions for everybody in this country. My understanding of the data, and I'm not deeply invested in this, is that is that being conservative doesn't actually drive people away. What does drive people away is becoming a political institution in the sense of national politics. If we go to the Greek word Greek root of it, becoming a political institution in terms of being a good citizen and a good neighbor is the main thing that draws people in. So I'm a Catholic. I agree with the Catholic teachings on abortion and on marriage. And I know people I literally coach baseball with who disagree with me on those things in our parish, who are still dedicated to building these institutions. So I don't buy into the idea, oh, well, these Christian churches would have a lot more if they just came around to agree with the public mindset on abortion, on gay marriage, or stop talking about abortion. I don't think that's the case, unless, and I think this mostly happens with Southern evangelical congregations, unless they become basically arms of a conservative movement or a liberal movement or a Republican Party or Democratic Party. That's guesswork on my part, but I think that's right. I need to grab my other water.
Thank you so much. My name is Claire, and I'm a John Jay Fellow currently. And so one of the books that we're currently reading as John Jay Fellows is The Benedict Option by Rotary, which you mentioned. And my question for you, Mr. Carney, is where is your solution different from Dreher's? Because your solution seems to be focused on building up the community. Dreher's is focused on kind of withdrawing from the larger community to build up smaller communities. And do you see shortfalls in Dreher's Benedict Option? Thank you.
So the last chapter, people ask if my book has a happy ending, and it does, but it's kind of an imaginary happy ending. But the story I tell is one of, it's based in church communities, like the Benedict Option, but it's one of multiple very different religions coming together. And I use my own neighborhood as an example. I talked about that, the one modern Orthodox synagogue on Arcola Avenue and one on Kent Mill Avenue. St. Andrew sits at the intersection of Arcola and Kent Mill. And I was talking about the Dutch Reformed Church, it's Christian Reformed Church. Right across Kent Mill Road is a Christian Reformed Church in Silver Spring. We do this thing in the spring around T-ball where we grill burgers and serve them every Friday night. And not just for the T-ball families, but try to increasingly make it be everybody shows up. And over Lent, obviously, we have spaghetti dinners and fish fries and all that stuff on Fridays. And so I sort of imagine, what if, well, we're doing that on Fridays in the summer and in the spring, what if the Christian Reformed Church was doing that on Saturday night? And what if Kent Mill Synagogue was doing that on Sunday night? And what if the Arcola Synagogue was doing that on Monday night? And what if the Church of Latter-day Saints was doing that on Tuesday night? And what if we not only welcomed people from those 5 congregations, we made sure that anybody who was hungry in Silver Spring knew that there was free food there? So obviously then this becomes big, a much bigger thing. And so my view is that, yeah, you do have to surround yourself with people of the same values. And some of what I'm talking about there gets really complicated by which day is your Sabbath, right? Like who's going to cook what and who's going to serve what foods on what day and what's going to be kosher and halal, et cetera. So there's lots of barriers, but that what makes America great, to borrow a phrase, is our pluralism and unity at the same time. And I don't think Dreher emphasizes the unity enough. In other words, as a modern culture, we blur too much things together, and he's trying to say we need to keep distinct pockets. And I refer to that in the book. Why did Uniontown and Fayette County collapse while Pittsburgh has bounced kind of up? They both suffered from the steel collapse because Pittsburgh had the Jewish community in Squirrel Hill and the Irish Catholic and the Italian Catholic and this Protestant and this Polish and all that. They had these strong institutions. So we need these strong, distinct institutions. But Pittsburgh was also Pittsburgh. It was also a whole city. It had these other things that bring us together. And so it's the multi-layered. There's a county government, which is separate from a church, which is next door to another church. They're all serving different functions. Some of them are overlapping. Some of them are next door to each other. So the I stopped liking the term melting pot a while ago because sort of the tapestry, the quilt is more of my image. So in other words, my Catholic parish needs the Kent Mill Synagogue and the Christian Reformed Church. It needs a Montgomery County government. I mean, God save me for saying that. I never thought I would say that. But it needs all those different things. So that, I think, is the thing that I would say, is that my institutions serve a purpose. And my parish, my church's main purpose is to hold the keys to heaven, in my view, but its worldly purpose is also different, and that we need all these different levels of community layered on top of each other and next door to each other.
Good evening. My name is Christian Cam. I go to Miami University in Ohio. And earlier this evening, you were talking about how technology is sort of a contributing factor to the alienation and isolation that we're seeing throughout this part of America and this part of society. And one thing I think we have to acknowledge is that progress is unstoppable. Technology is not going to stop becoming more advanced. One other thing we also have to acknowledge is that technology also isolates people now more than it ever has in the history of mankind, and it draws them to screens, like you were bringing up cell phones. So how do you think that this is going to, I guess, like, what role do you think this is going to play in the future? Do you think there's any way of curbing the way technology is sort of eroding humanity and leading us into this more like techno-futuristic society?
Well, again, I live in Washington, so when people talk about these problems, they always look for some solution to it. You know what my solution is? My kids don't have smartphones. They get a combined, among all of them, like an hour a month on an iPad or an iPhone or something like that. We let them watch idiotic TV shows when we absolutely need a break and they're all about to murder each other. But I also send them to schools that Catholic schools that have similar, very anti-screen policies. And so far, and we don't have video games for our kids either. So far, this is like one of the best decisions we've ever made. If we had no TV at all, it would probably be a mistake, again, because the kids probably would have murdered one another by now. So, but keeping them away from the real addictive stuff of the interactivity of the iPhone, the social media, and all that stuff is a solution that us and dozens of other families are doing. And that if you go to Palo Alto at the elite private schools, they probably have very similar policies, ironically. So again, like I said about sort of my solutions, the solution that's going to work is going to be a million small solutions. Technology, like social media, can actually serve a connectivity purpose. Mark Zuckerberg wants that to happen, but he doesn't understand how it could. He says, well, the community institutions that used to exist, I want to replace with Facebook. No, what social media can do, it's good to the extent that it serves getting people together physically. Now, that almost sounds like an old-fashioned, archaic caveman idea, but people have to get together physically. And my class reunion for my high school class never would have happened if it hadn't been for Facebook. We have a Pelham High School class of 1996 group, which is basically useless, except that it made us all get together. And getting together then formed other bonds, which has made other positive things. Finding out that this one guy got divorced, we didn't know that, and so then people are able to help him out and support him and reach out to him. So that's the main benefit of social media in this regard, I think, is if it serves to get people together. If it serves to try to replace physical other institutions, then you're right. It is tearing us apart. But a governmental policy or anything like that, I think, would be a mistake. I think we need cultural norms that A, kids should stay off it, and B, like in most polite society, people aren't, at least in the circles I run, aren't regularly doing it and checking their phones. But I've noticed that sometimes my phone buzzes once or twice. And if I'm not with my wife, I'm thinking, okay, there might be something going on. Sometimes it's just like, where the hell did you put the car keys? And you need to check. And I pull out my phone and I check, and then immediately the other guys start doing it. So there had been sort of this norm of, we don't check the phones because we're with each other. But then once you do it, it breaks down. So I think norms has got to be the way. Again, not the most satisfying answer, but if my kids' schools can have these policies, there basically are no smartphones. If they see a smartphone in the hallway, they take it away. If they see a smartphone in the hallway of the middle school or elementary school kids, then the parents get in trouble too. High school kids are allowed to have them as long as no teacher ever sees them. As long as, if there can be institutions that make those rules, I think more institutions can make those rules. There are pushes to say wait till 8th grade. I say wait till 13th grade. You should be a freshman in college before your parents give you a smartphone. That's radical.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm also at the John Jay Institute. And one of the things that I really liked in the beginning of your talk is talking about how that correlation between declining civil society and declining share of the vote for Trump. And you mentioned a little earlier about the American South, but despite the high religiosity, still a lack of civil society. If you could talk about in your travels as a political reporter during those primaries, why states like Alabama and Mississippi still went overwhelmingly for Trump, you know, in spite or because of the religiosity. I'd love to know about that.
That's a great question. And it's one that I really am only able to speculate on. And some of it might be a theological speculation. Again, I belong to a denomination that is very hierarchical, and it's actually a sin to not go to church on Sunday. I have to go to confession if I skip Mass on Sunday. I'm catching a train home tomorrow, hopefully in time to make the 10 o'clock Mass at St. Andrew, but it's a sin to skip Mass on Sunday. If your emphasis is on, I mean, ultimately an individual relationship with Christ is what Christianity is always about, but I can imagine some teachings going so far in that direction that some number of people take that to mean that Christianity isn't necessarily a communal activity and then withdraw away from it. Another, again, is I have seen a lot of aspects of Christianity become overly politicized, and I think that probably is more prevalent in the American South, where they become, again, political movements where they're talking about, you know, building a wall or talking or whatever, or why tax cuts are good, and or talking about that's more prevalent in some parts of the South. And so churches' role in providing good worldly outcomes in measurable ways is largely about attendance and connection. What we don't have great data on is there is no good set of county by county data on church attendance. This is, if some billionaire loves my book and is willing to fund more research, I would have another, pew counts have been done, but I would want somebody with a clicker watching people who go in every church, synagogue, and mosque, etc., every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for a few months, and then measure the sociological outcomes. And what I would predict is that factor of attendance is the predictor of the good outcomes, and low attendance is a predictor of alienation. And so I think that there's so the politicization is one thing, but I do also think that religiosity is more connected to attendance among Mormons, among Reformed Christians, and among Catholics than it is in some other religions.
All right, last question. Go right.
My name is Justin. I'm a sophomore here at Penn. So my question kind of goes back to the political aspects that you talked about earlier. And I was wondering what you think the role of, you know, the destruction of some of these institutions, whether it's more religious, whether it's the bowling leagues that obviously we've talked about, how that plays a role in tribalism and in polarization. Because I feel like, and I know from some of my more secular friends back home in suburbia, that if you don't have your bowling leagues, if you don't have these connections, and you still want to try to find these friends and these connections that we all think is important, you turn to politics and you turn to your political party.
I think that's right. So first of all, like populism, tribalism is something that I think gets used as a bad word and isn't necessarily a bad word. we are supposed to belong to tribes. The idea that, oh, we're all just members of the human race is a silly idea that doesn't take into account the way people are. But different tribes have different natures. So again, my parish plays, my daughter plays for the St. Andrew basketball team. And when we beat St. Bernadette's, it's the parish next door, it's sort of extra sweet, right? Oh, those people at St. Bede's, because they have a better choir, they think they're better than us. But then also, we're definitely defining ourselves against our Jewish neighbors again, but not in anything that has bred any animosity in the 14 years I've lived in Silver Spring. Not to say it hasn't in the past. Where I grew up in Pelham, New York, you were Irish or Italian or other. There were occasional fights, but it wasn't necessarily bad. So tribalism is a necessary part of life. I mean, if you root for your college football team, that's a tribalism. It's you belong to something. And while on one level that means you're defining yourself against something else, if you're Ohio State defining yourself against the University of Michigan, that's not ultimately destructive. One of the best predictors of Trump vote was when the Census Bureau asks you your ancestry. And they leave it open-ended, but they give a couple examples. They say, for instance, I think they say Irish, German, African American, Chinese, etc. About 10% of so I would obviously say Irish. About 10% of the people answer American. So their ancestry, not their citizenship, their ancestry is American. That was a big producer of the predictor of the Trump vote. And I think it has to do with a term deracination and uprooting, not having an identity. But I also think it's a predictor of white nationalism. If you aren't a Christian, if you're from a place that's not really a place, like the guy who drove his car into the crowd in Charlottesville and murdered that woman and tried to murder more people after the white nationalist rally, he kind of grew up in some of the parts of Ohio like J.D. Vance, but here and there. He didn't have a father growing up. He didn't have a religion. He didn't belong to anything. And he couldn't even imagine belonging to anything, but he's like, I'm an American, I'm white, and white nationalism dragged him in. So the most extreme, I think the story of ISIS and Al-Qaeda is probably a similar story. People without a real tribe, something they belong to, seek to belong to something. And often they're dragged towards the worst things. So the intermediate level is what you're describing, just national politics. What I am is a Women's March person. What I am is a MAGA hat wearer. And that these tribes, and Ben Sass wrote a good book on this, he calls them, I think he calls them fake tribes. These tribes don't really impart these things I've been talking about, this higher sense of purpose, this connectivity, this safety net. They just they only provide the sense of us versus a them. So I think the political polarization and the total extremes of whether it's a white nationalism or overseas in ISIS or in Al-Qaeda, I think those are rooted in a tribalism that is inherent, and the species of it that pops up when the other tribes that are more natural, more organic, and not necessarily destructive aren't as available.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's it for our time together. Just a few things before we break for the night. One, I just want to again thank Andy Cooper-Smith and all of the Wharton Public Policy Initiative team. All of this went so smoothly, and we're in this beautiful space at this wonderful campus because of Andy and his team's work. So we're really grateful to them for opening their doors to us and being great hosts. Thanks also to all the other staff, the AV staff, the kitchen staff who treated us so well the last day or so. So just a couple notes for the AEI Executive Council members. One, most of you have taken the survey for the conference already. A few of you haven't, unless you want to receive 18 more emails from David telling you to. Yes, you will. So if you want to cut down on the email traffic from David, which I know we all do, please, I'm sorry, just kidding. Please complete the survey. Your feedback, as I told some of you earlier, really helps us make these better. Hopefully they get better each time, and that's because of you guys giving us good ideas for how to improve them. And it also helps us make the case for why this work is important. So please do that. Tomorrow, check out from the hotel at 11 a.m. So please just be out of your rooms by that time. And then reimbursement, you should have all the details about being reimbursed for your travel expenses. If you have any questions about that, email one of members of our team or our colleague Katya. Okay, finally, I want to thank all of the Penn students who joined us. Thanks to you, too, for hosting us on your campus. We're grateful for that, and thanks for engaging in the conversations. The last few days, it's been fun having some additional perspectives from you all. And thanks also to the John Jay Fellows for joining us. It was fun to meet all of you and have you with us for a couple days. Okay, and finally, I just want to say, again, thank you so much to the Executive Council members. I hope you know this. You guys really are a part of the AEI community. Our staff, our upper-level staff, is so proud of this work, and that's because of all of you and the work that you're doing on your campuses. And they want to invest in you because you guys are doing a huge amount of work to foster good, respectful, important dialogue about important issues on your campuses. So we're fortunate for the opportunity to partner with you. We're looking forward to this coming semester. To all you seniors, who this might be the last conference for you, thank you so much for spending part of your undergraduate career with us. And we're looking forward to staying in touch with all of you in one way or another. So let us know if you have questions, but thanks so much for being with us this weekend. Enjoy the rest of your night.